All right, welcome back and thanks for tuning in again. So welcome to the new subscribers. I've noticed that this channel has just passed about 50,000 subscribers, so thank you very much for that. I hope you find the videos interesting. So this video is going to be a bit of a follow-up to a video from a few weeks ago on this oil well supply hit and miss engine. Now if you didn't watch that video, I'll leave a link in this video's description and maybe even above my head here, a little pop-up. I'd recommend you go watch that video for a little bit of context. So during that last video, I wasn't able to get this engine running quite how I would have liked. It was doing what I would call the double suck for a hit and miss engine, and I'd like to try to avoid that. We'll go more into that in a few minutes, but first I'd like to walk around the engine, and for anybody that's not versed in the operation of a hit and miss engine like this, you might find that a little bit helpful in understanding what I want this thing to do. So let's take a walk around. Okay, I'd like to talk briefly about what a hit and miss engine actually is and what the term hit and miss refers to. So what this is a 4 horsepower air-cooled engine which operates on the 4-stroke cycle principle. So you've got the intake stroke, the compression stroke, the power stroke, and the exhaust stroke. That is all the same for most hit and miss engines. Now there are 2-stroke hit and miss engines, but for this video we're just going to be referring to the 4-stroke cycle. So like all 4-stroke engines, you've got an intake valve right here. This is called an atmospheric intake valve, or sometimes called a poppet valve. And then you've got your exhaust valve down here. This is really just the stem, and well, so is that for that matter. You've got a camshaft here, and in this big portion, this makes up the cylinder, and then there's a piston with a connecting rod inside there. Hit and miss refers to the means by which the engine speed is controlled or regulated, essentially how the thing is governed. When you start this engine, it operates like a conventional 4-stroke engine. It goes through its intake stroke, its compression stroke, its power stroke, and its exhaust stroke. Once it reaches a certain speed, and that speed is determined in this case by this little spring right here. Once it reaches a certain speed, we've got a lever arm here which moves over and wedges itself underneath this push rod or actuator here for the exhaust valve. What that does is holds the exhaust valve open, and it essentially negates all the other strokes so that the engine is freewheeling with no compression. In that case, like I said, the exhaust valve is open, so when the piston comes up, it pushes all the air out of the cylinder, out of the exhaust pipe. But when the piston travels back down, the air can rush right back in through the exhaust system the way it came out. No intake action happens because there's no low pressure that's created in the cylinder. On that note, an atmospheric intake valve has no rocker arm, no push rod, no cam. The name implies what it is. The pressure that's all around us, the atmospheric pressure, pushes down on the inner face of the valve where the valve stem is located and pushes the valve open when a low pressure is created in the cylinder. I'm going to try to illustrate this for you here. I've got the compression release open so I could spin the engine over. So you can see the cam rotating now. Actually, the valve's coming down. So say we're about to go through an exhaust stroke. We completed our power stroke. There's the cam coming around. Here's the high spot right here. So the cam's coming around, and it's going to lift up on the exhaust valve. Now that the exhaust valve is up and the engine is at speed, this lever will be pushed into seat on this surface. The engine will continue to rotate. This might be kind of difficult for me to do with one hand. Yep, I missed it. Come on. There it goes. The spring tension of the exhaust valve pushing down on the follower, the cam follower or push rod, is now holding this lever engaged. Ordinarily, it would want to spring back. And that will happen after the engine has coasted down with no compression or no combustion stroke. The engine speed is obviously going to slow down. When that occurs and the engine's RPM slows, the spring allows these two flyweights to return back to their starting position, which allows this lever to be pulled out. And you can see when that cam comes around again, it's going to push up slightly on the push rod, and that lever is going to come out, at which time the engine goes through another combustion cycle, because the exhaust valve is closed. When the piston travels down on its intake stroke, the low pressure can be developed, which is going to pull the intake valve open. So aside from that, one other interesting thing about this engine is it is a hot tube engine. Hot tube refers to the means by which the air-fuel mixture is ignited within the cylinder. There's no spark on this engine. What you've got in this chimney or burner assembly, can you see right down there? Right in the center is a little steel tube that is heated by this propane burner. That tube glows red hot on its exterior and on its interior. So on the compression stroke, this volume here that would be in the cylinder of air and fuel is compressed to the point where it is forced up into that tube, and the heat of that tube ignites the charge. Now, that being said, timing is not really adjustable easily on this engine. You can play around with the length of the hot tube and the heat of the flame and the location of the flame on the tube. That's really about all the adjustment that you have. So my issue with the engine last time was that it would run pretty well, but it would do what I would call the double suck or the double intake stroke. And what I mean by that is that when the engine would slow down, when it would coast down under no compression and be ready to bring itself back up to speed or complete another combustion event to get itself back up to speed, it would go through the motions, the exhaust valve would close, the piston would travel down, drawing an air-fuel mixture into the cylinder. The piston would come up and compress that air-fuel mixture, but it would not ignite. It wouldn't ignite. Not a little bit, nothing. The piston would then travel back down, just because the momentum of the flywheels would pull it back down. The exhaust valve would open, it would push that air-fuel mixture charge out of the exhaust. Then it would proceed to, the piston would travel back down, it would pull in another air-fuel mixture, and that one would actually ignite on compression. The engine would come back up to speed, the exhaust valve would latch out or be held open, and the engine would coast down and repeat the cycle. For some reason, well, I kind of know the reason now, but I could not get it to just complete one combustion event. I couldn't even get it to complete two combustion events in a row. It would always miss the first combustion event. And I tried a few different things, tried varying the gas pressure, tried varying the heat of the hot tube, tried different spring tensions here, and I couldn't quite get it to work out. But I think I got it now, and I think this engine will now run like I really want it to run indefinitely. So let's cut and we'll light the hot tube and we'll start this thing up. Okay, so let's light the hot tube. I'm going to turn the propane gas on. Okay. Tank valve is on. Where's my matches at? Here we go. It's a little windy out. Hopefully I can get the burner lit. We'll wait wait for the wind to stop here. Come on, don't go out. Okay. That's lit. Yeah, it's quite windy out now all of a sudden. Okay, so while that's warming up, let me talk about a few of the things I did to hopefully get this engine to run correctly. So first off, you'll notice the fuel supply system has been changed around. Now, the biggest change has been the addition of this accumulator tank to the fuel supply to the engine, the actual combustion fuel supply. Also, we've got two independent regulators here, low pressure regulators, one for the hot tube burner, little line going to the burner, and one down here to feed the engine's combustion gas or combustion fuel. So we're still running this burner at the I forget what it was now, 10 inches of water column feed to the hot tube burner, but the lower regulator that's feeding the accumulator and eventually the engine's fuel is only running at 3 inches of water. So that seems to be what the engine is happy with running wise. The low pressure and the large volume of fuel readily available seems to let the engine run correctly. Second thing I did was I should have shown this, but I changed the orifice diameter for the hot tube burner from, I believe, 25 thousandths was what it was. I changed it down to 15 thousandths. So my reasoning behind that is because I noticed in the last video we were kind of getting a yellow flame out of the hot tube burner. So for some reason it wasn't quite burning as clean as it could have. So I reduced the orifice size for the hot tube burner to hopefully get a little bit of extra fuel velocity to draw a little bit more air in. Let's see, let me turn this light on. Draw a little bit more air in through these valves to hopefully get better combustion in the hot tube burner. Keep the heat up a little, essentially. The third thing I did was I changed the intake valve spring. Now I went with a spring with a greater number of coils and a greater wire diameter. So the spring is actually a bit more tense than the old spring that I was using. And I think that with the greater number of coils, the change in spring pressure between closed and, say, a little bit open and then more open is reduced, if that makes any sense. So essentially it has the rate of spring tension is more consistent. Other than that, I think pretty much nothing else has changed. But I did a lot of playing around with it to try to figure out what actually needed to be done to make it run correctly. So I'm going to give the hot tube a few more minutes to heat up, and we're going to start it up. Okay, I think we've given the hot tube sufficient time to warm up. So, well, let's get ready to start here. So, I'll turn all the oilers on. That's off. We'll give it a start here. Takes a little bit of tweaking of the gas valve. That's what we want right there. One combustion event. That's what we were after right there. So right now it's coasting with no compression. The exhaust valve is held open. When the engine speed drops, this lever moves out, allows the exhaust valve to close, allows the engine to complete an intake stroke, then a combustion stroke, then an exhaust stroke again. One intake. Perfect. That's what we want right there. Now, of course, if this engine was under load, it would be firing much more frequently because, what am I trying to say here? Because as the combustion stroke would bring the speed up, the speed would drop more quickly with a load on the engine. It wouldn't be just the force of turning the flywheels to bring the speed down. And I cannot think today. I'm sorry about that. I really need to put belt something up to this thing and put a little bit of load on it. Missed that one. Missed that one. Not that bad. Let's sit you up on the tripod and just watch it for a few minutes. Now the sunlight's making this difficult. What if I come over here a little bit? That's a little bit better. Sorry guys, this isn't National Geographic. My camera work might not be the greatest. You know, somebody mentioned in the comments in the last video that this would be a good engine for one of those 10-hour-long, you know, noises to fall asleep to videos. Kind of has an interesting little whistle to it when it completes a combustion stroke. I think the reason for that has to do with the condition of the cylinder wall. Now, this engine sat outside for, well, probably its whole life. At some point, I think some water got down the cylinder, got down the exhaust. That resulted in some rust pitting on the inside walls of the cylinder. So, as such, we've got a little bit of blow-by past the piston rings. It still runs nice, though. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this video. There was a lot of rambling in it. I appreciate you sticking through it if you did. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.